Call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Next item is reading of school board norms. Do I have anyone willing to read the norms for us this evening? Thank you, Jeff.
School board meeting norms. Be prepared, be on time, value and respect each other, exercise thoughtful deliberation and conversation, be professional at the board table and when visiting with the general public, speak up when the norms are not being followed, and advocate on behalf of students and keep the community in mind.
Thank you, Jeff. Right here.
Thank you. My apologies for being late. I got stuck in the 47th Avenue closure. We are now on the public hearing and on the preliminary budget and certificate of tax levy for FY24 section of our meeting. Brandon?
Yes, thank you. Chairperson Flynn, members of the board, on your meeting on August 7th, the school board authorized the preliminary budget and tax levy, which called for total tax or total mill levy of 131.68. The preliminary budget and tax levy was certified by the county auditor as required by state, and the notices of the estimated property tax and budget hearing dates were published. All told, this is the same mill levy, save the additional 20.68 mills for seeking an interest, or those that were voted on by the public referendum on May 16th. And all told, or as part of this process, of course, citizens should be given the opportunity to present oral or written comments. So that's what we're here for today. And the next steps would be to take this information into our finance committee tomorrow and into final board consideration of our tax levy and budget on October 9th.
At this time, we'll hold the public hearing. Do we have anybody from the public who wishes to make any comments? Okay. Michael, is that you? Okay. If you just want to push the yellow button when you get up to the podium, then we can hear you well.
All right, thank you very much. The yellow button. Oops, there we go. Ms. Flynn and members of the school board, thank you very much for listening this afternoon or this evening. My name is Michael Venaccio, and I've been a 21-year resident down here at Grand Forks at 1742 South 34th Street. I retired from Strata Corporation in 2015, so for the past 8 years, people would call me a person of leisure. You know, retired. You know how retired is, no stress, no worry, no alarm clock, no money. Not necessarily in that order, but I would like to make some comments relating to the proposed property tax. And I know I did send you all emails, and Ms. Flynn, thank you very much for your response, and that's very much appreciated. I was very, shall we say, shocked, dismayed, and alarmed when I saw essentially over $5,000 correction, over a $500 increase in my city taxes. Now, being on a fixed income, it gets a little dicey sometimes looking at all these increases. For example, I pointed out that if you include the proposed cost of living increase for seniors, the total increase since 2019 amounts to 20.3%. In one fell swoop, all the taxing agencies want to give me an 18.13% increase, which essentially works to negate most, if not all, of the increases that seniors got. I understand the valuation, and believe me, I'd love to wage a magic wand and increase my salary by 9.18%. Can't do it. Even if I take the increased valuation which has gone up 9.18%, and I apply it to my school tax that I paid in 2022, which is $1,004.66, my new tax should only be $1,096.89, a difference between the 1303.64 proposed of $206.75. What I'm saying to all the entities, and believe me, if I had the opportunity, I would have been at the city council meeting and I would have been at the county commissioners meeting, but I had some conflicts. In the same time that I'm talking about the increases in our COLA since 2020, inflation in this country has gone up 16.6%. Food costs have gone up 20%, if not more. Energy costs have gone up 30%, 38%, if not more, yet real wages have gone down 3%. Can't keep pace with inflation. The average home to date is paying $709 more per month now than they paid for the same goods and services they did in 2020. And again, seniors are on a fixed income. At some point, the ghost that laid the golden egg is going to be served for dinner. We can't go on with this. We understand that there was a vote on the school. Great. But my understanding is that less than 5% of the voters in Grand Forks approved that school, and less than 10% of the voters voted. Why? Because the vote itself, and I know this is a city charter issue, but the vote was held at it's an odd time. And if we're going to have a vote on a $70 million plus proposition that affects us all, we should really say, all right, what's the ceiling? Do we need 50% of the voters to participate? What percentage do we need to make this pass? I guess in my perspective, I'm looking at this increase. I'm looking at what my COLAs are. I'm looking at the poor performance of the stock market for investment, and that's going out the window. I look at the Homestead Act. Yes, and you can say, all right, well, we're going to get a $500 credit, or we're going to get, a $70,000 limit. In my age group, I know a lot of people were very frugal, had very good jobs, so they're making money. $70,000 is a drop in the bucket, and we can't qualify for homestead credit. There has to be a better way of doing this. There has to be some realization that you can't get so much blood out of the seniors. And again, I'm in a better position, and I don't know what other people are in the town are saying when it comes to inflation, when it comes to property taxes, but at some point, I'm waving the white flag. It's getting to the point where I don't know what to do. So all I'm saying is, guys, and this applies to every city and every taxable entity, take a step back and look what you're doing to people on fixed incomes in light of inflation and cost of living. That's all I'm asking, because I think a nearly 20% increase in my taxes that wipes out any gains I made in the past 5 years, unconscionable. So that's one issue, and the second issue is if we're going to have referendums on taxes, we should do so to get maximum participation, and perhaps the city charter needs to be changed to say, all right, if you're talking budgetary, you need at least half or 50% or more of eligible voters to approve it. And again, but that's a conversation with the city council. But those are, like I say, I'm not here to be confrontational. I'm just here to present facts and how they affect the seniors. And I'm happy to, let anybody know how I computed this. But those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Venascio.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? I think I saw you raise your hand, sir.
Is it on? Okay. Thank you for your time. For any of you who are working for a private company, can you go to your boss and say, I need a 19% raise? You're probably out the door with no job. If we need money temporarily to build the school, let's put that as a fund and not increase 19% for perpetuity. It's not sustainable. It's based on valuations of homes that will fluctuate in the wind. If you bought a used car in the last few years or last probably 18 months, that car dropped in value. Same thing's going to happen with houses. It's cyclical. I do not see that 19% coming back to us when the value of the house drops. So I'm just asking that we look at this. We're taking young kids who are building families and they're trying to survive in this town. And it's expensive in this town. It's expensive in this state. So if we can just keep in mind that there's only so much money to go around, and it has to be in smaller chunks, especially if it's going to be, this is your new tax rate for as long as you live in this town. It's a penalty, in my opinion. Thank you.
Sir, would you mind stating your name for the minutes?
Dylan Abler,
Thank you.
do you want my address?
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments for the public comment period? Mr. Butter, I know you're for the citizen comment, so we can wait to then, but if you have comments about this, more than willing to let you. Okay, sounds good. Okay. Okay, we're now closing the agenda item for the public hearing on the preliminary budget and certificate of tax levy for FY '24. We'll move on to our school board meeting approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Cynthia. Is there a second? Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're now on to the approval of minutes from September 11th, 2023. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion by Cynthia. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Monty. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. And I'm sorry, but do we have anyone on the phone? Joel is on the phone, okay? We're now moving into the public comment section. Individuals wishing to address the school board during this time frame are asked to complete a public comment card, submit it to the school board secretary before the start of the meeting, and be invited to speak. Each person may speak for up to 3 minutes. No individual may speak on the same topic more than once. The chairperson reserves the right to limit the comments and the number of speakers. School board members shall not engage in a response or enter a debate about any issues brought before the board during this portion of the meeting, and public comments and concerns will be directed to the superintendent of schools. I have 2 blue cards. Mr. Vanascio, you spoke during the public hearing, so the last one I have is Mr. Barta.
Good evening. So 3 points. First, it was sorely disappointing to see the reactions of the school board members when they put the pornography back into the libraries. To get giddy and excited that you're going to put an additional 6 books in the library says a lot about the individuals. So that's pretty sad. Second, the return to learn mask requirement that says that you will request visitors to possibly wear masks. The science is already out. So can we relook at that and apply the science that identified that cloth masks do nothing to stop the spread? And finally, the reason I'm here is I'm sick and tired of us setting Dr. Brenner up for failure. I don't know where y'all work, but a 224-point evaluation is asinine. There's no supervisory body, there's no supervisor that I know of in my many, many years of running businesses that would ever evaluate one subordinate with 224 points. Plus, a lot of those points are redundant, especially contributing to the SEL piece. So if you don't mind, if you would look at page 60 of 123, curriculum and instruction. There's for professionals out there, there's a thing called SMART objectives. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. Based off of this, I would tell you that you probably haven't. SMART is very simple. It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-driven. That's how you evaluate a subordinate, right? None of these 224 points in this evaluation is smart, are smart. None of them. You have no metrics installed. None. How do I measure performance? Facilitates organization and evaluation of classroom and extracurricular programs. What am I evaluating? Objectively, not subjectively. Now, for some of y'all up there, all you do is give Mr. Brenner a 5 across the board. I've seen that the last 3 evaluations, and that's pretty sad, right? You've got to do better. He can't achieve his goals and visions if you don't hold him to a standard, if you don't identify the standard. A good standard is increase our students' math scores or comprehension from 40% to 45%. It's smart, it's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable. If that's not achievable after you sit down with your subordinate and you say, hey, listen, he says, I can do 3% in a year because we have a lot of hurdles to overcome. That's when you sit down and say, okay, great, we'll make it 3%. But this stuff is silly. You're not measuring anything, right? So that was page 60. If we go on to page 63, we see the same thing, but this one is more concerning. We
Mr.
talk
Barta,
about-
I'll give you another minute to finish.
Thank you,
okay?
ma'am.
Yep.
We talk about academic engagement and strategies for student success. When we talk about that, the thing that pops into your mind is academics. There's 3 goals. One is effective teaching in every classroom. Okay, how is he going to measure that? Well, off of the performance of the students, right? A production line, how many pieces do I have at the end? That's how I measure it. But this one talks about the teacher's conditions created for learning. How do you measure that? You can't. But the second and third one are about diversity of gender, race, culture, and age differences. That's academic engagement. That's our students' success. That's the second one. The third one is understanding our own cultural viewpoints and biases and effectively engage diverse families and community members. Come on. But you have SEL covered later on. So we're covering it twice. It's on page 68. So finally, if you go to the last page, the evaluation page, and this is most critical, right? So I want to make sure that I'm very clear, and I apologize for squeezing more time out of you, ma'am. But if you go to page 82, right, of your document, after we've taken all 224 points, I'm sorry, and we weight them, right? We break it out into 4 categories, and I don't know who led this event, but they're trying to fake the funk, and they're not doing a good job. You weighted all 4 opportunities at 25%. All 4. When you approach anybody in the business world and you say, hey, I'm looking for a highly effective individual, what percentage of people do you think that is? Most will respond, top 3%. That's how the government rates it. If you're in the top 3, you're highly effective. Here, 75%. What you would grade in your schools as a C+ is what you're identifying as highly effective. We've got to do better for this man. School board, wake up. He's the CEO. And I heard him say he's the subject matter expert. He didn't say that. He said you were the educator. You were the... Good. Let him do that. Take this other junk off of his plate because our kids aren't benefiting. But board, please resign. Because what you've demonstrated time and time again is you don't know what's going on. You don't know how to manage.
Thank you, Mr. Barta.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate the time.
We'll now move on to our superintendent's recommendations for discussion item. Dr. Brenner.
Thank you, Madam President. Page 18 of your packet. This is the design proposal for public school on military installations grant, and I'm happy to announce that Tanya Schleicher is here, who is our grant writer for this proposal, and also Dan Miller from JLG and Brian Sommerfeld from JLG are here as well. So I don't think I need to harken back and provide the history because at our last meeting you had a pretty thick slide deck relative to a new Twining school at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So we will just go and move right into the presentation. And we have fewer slides today than we did last time. And just want to share with you some of the information that's going to be submitted as early but not later than tomorrow, September 26th. This is a pretty darn exciting time for District 140 in collaboration with District 1. District 140 did approve this by motion at our meeting last week on Tuesday, and so that'll be the final ask that we have of this board tonight. So the first slide, I'm just going to bring you back to some of the pieces of the grant that we would be going after in terms of eligibility. So I'm just going to read those bullets under the cost to correct the school's capacity and condition. And just a refresher, it's not up there. In 2017, when we had a walkthrough from the Department of Defense, the school was at 49%, needing refurbishment or replacement. Things were outdated. We are six years beyond that and certainly are identified as a school that can be now replaced. So some of the costs can be used for project administration, architectural and engineering design, A&E, which is why we have GLG here, preparation of environmental documentation. Grand Forks Air Force Base leadership has done a phenomenal job of engaging with us and moving this piece forward. Inspection and testing, construction, equipment and furnishings, contingency costs, of course, we'll build that into the overall budget. The demolition of facilities, we say that plurally because we would actually have 2 buildings to raise. And just again, another bit of context for you, this would be modeled after what we're doing at Valley. We would keep our students, I'm getting way ahead of myself if we get to phase 2 of this process, but we would keep our kids in Twining while we raise the old Eielson and then build on that site. And once that building is ready, then we would move students over. So we're wanting to ask for the raising of 2 facilities rather than just 1. And the cost of swing space if required to implement the project, and we wouldn't need that because our kids would stay in the present facility. So next slide, please. Thank you, Dan. So we've had lots of conversation about renovation versus new build, and I will share with you when we pulled together our first committee that include local legislators, community ambassadors for the Grand Forks Air Force Base, all stakeholders who had a say or who wanted to touch the project were around this table in this room. And there wasn't a lot of conversation around renovation, but there was a lot of excitement around a new build and what that could bring to the Grand Forks Air Force Base as new missions come, as new families move in. We want to make sure that there's a reason that they're choosing Grand Forks rather than trying to avoid our cold winters, which doesn't happen here. So the cost of to renovate the building would be at that $42.2 million, a little bit north of that. But to build new, in wanting to do everything that we would like to do in terms of having a STEM school, having spaces that are unique to the mission of the Grand Forks Air Force Base, bringing the history of the base, the past history, the present, and the future missions, we want to really have it have a different vibe. And we've seen some examples of what a STEM school could look like, and we want our students and our families to see that school as the center of community at the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So a new build has a higher price tag. That's a higher price tag than Valley Middle School with fewer square feet, but nonetheless, as we're looking at being able to access a portion of $650 million federal dollars with a 20% local match. When I say local, that's not a local District 1 taxpayer support. That's in and around the base, that tax base, and hopefully through some of our conversations and networking with our legislators who are supportive of the Air Force Base, we can build that 20% bridge. District 140 does have about $5.1 million in their general fund, so there's something there too. So I think as we pool all things together, we will eventually be able to get that over the finish line. We did a lot of, next slide please, Dan. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Dan Miller and Brian Sommerfeld. I think Dan's going to take the visioning piece, and then Brian will.
Thank you, Dr. Brenner. So,
There's one button.
There you go.
Oh, there you go.
all right, thank you, Dr. Brenner. So what you have before you is the vision statement that was developed with the steering committee and many of the stakeholders, which many of you may have been involved with some of this process, that is actually being used as the guiding, some of the guiding principles that are going to make the design decisions pathway forward going ahead. So the vision statement is a future-ready learning environment focused on providing military-affiliated students with a high-quality education through the principles of STEM learning. A design that celebrates the values of our military personnel and provides an enhanced quality of life for our military families. And then what you see there is the 5 pillars that we'll be using to guide those design decisions as the project progresses once we're past the grant stage and moving forward. Primarily being community connection. This facility really is the connecting point between District 140 and District 1, between the Grand Forks community and the Grand Forks Air Force Base. So we want to acknowledge that through the design. Also, we want this design to celebrate the story of the Grand Forks Air Base. There's a lot of rich history over there of the mission of the base, and we want that to come through to not only document that history, but also give something that the new families coming into the community there can add to and be a part of. The facility is, and the curriculum is really excited about being STEM focused, and we're looking at that and how that can influence the design also. And then also the building itself as being a teaching tool for the students to actually see how the learning environments can actually affect their learning process, both by being future ready and flexible, but also through the sustainable practices that we want to incorporate into the design that the students can actually watch and observe as the building functions and operates. And then finally, the global perspective aspect of it. The student base, the student body that's coming to this facility is really not coming just from North Dakota or from this area or the Red River Valley, but they're actually coming from around the world, from other bases overseas even. And so acknowledging that and understanding that and giving these students the foundation to basically be ready for the next step in their, getting the generation ready for the future. So those are really the guiding principles behind it, behind the process. And with that, we'll allow Brian to share what the design premise and the work of scope is right now that's going into the grant application.
Thank you. So the next 3 slides will illustrate the work that was done for the proposal to work on the design of the project so that we could get a good understanding of what that dollar amount should be for, when we ask for those dollars for the grant. The student population is going to be roughly 500 students, and the building is going to be around 110,000 square feet. Inside of that building, there'll be an early childhood learning neighborhood, a K through 5 learning neighborhood, a 6 through 8 learning neighborhood, various activity areas, administration wing, special education spaces, fine arts area, which includes a 300-seat auditorium, various building services, so loading and receiving area, mechanical spaces, and then also a variety of outdoor spaces. This is the site plan, and unfortunately some of this line work doesn't show up as well as I was hoping it would, but what you'll see here is this is a result of input that we got at a design shred that we held about a month and a half ago on the Air Force Base, and it was an opportunity for people to come and give their feedback as to what works well currently, what could be improved upon, what they would like to see in the new building. And the number one complaint that we got about the existing site circulation was the parent pickup and drop-off process and the congestion that came along with that. And the biggest cause of that was the kindergarten pickup, because parents are required to, park their cars, physically get out of their cars, and then go into the building or make physical contact with the student. And so when we laid out this site, that was our number one, priority, is how can we make that site parent pickup and drop off process that much easier. And so you can see in the lower left-hand corner, which is the southwest corner of the site, that's where everyone will be entering, whether you're a parent of a, kindergarten student or early childhood student, or, 1st through 8th grade student. Everyone will enter at that southwest corner there. Then the parking lot that's just right off the, I'll point here and up here as well, right there. That is the parking lot for the kindergarten and early childhood and pre-K parents, so they can have the ability to get off of that drive right away, park over there and get their students, and then be able to come back out into that driveway. If you're a 1st through 8th grade student parent, you can continue down that drive, and then you can immediately start parking or queuing your car along the east side of that drive. So that would be a one-way drive, but it would have 2 lanes so that you can park along the east side, pick up your student, and then continue out onto the west side of the drive and continue north, and then head back out onto Louisiana Street. So I'll just, point here again for a second. So coming up here, picking up your students, and then being able to come back out and go back out onto Louisiana Street right there. And then the bus pickup and drop off would happen on the north side of the building. There's a location where the buses can park, queue there. We have space for about three buses. The students that would take the buses could exit out of the north entrance of the building, which is also the event and staff entry. And then they would just circle back around and exit onto Louisiana Street. And then that parking lot that's to the north of the building, that would also be staff and event parking. So if there's a football game or an event in the auditorium, that's where that parking could take place. Also, you'll see on the site is a football field with a synthetic running track, and then there's a kickball and softball field in the lower right-hand corner. And then there are 2 dedicated, two different playgrounds for early childhood and then the 1st through 5th grade students, so those are separate. And another complaint that we heard at that first meeting was the winds and how can we position those playgrounds and use the building to block the wind. A lot of these kids are coming from southern climates or much warmer climates, so they're not used to the bitter cold. So anything that we could do to help with the wind, that would be greatly appreciated. And so that's why we placed the playgrounds at the south and southwest corner, so that the 2-story portion of the building, which is on the south end, that'll provide some good protection from that wind. And then the last thing on the site is there's an outdoor classroom or learning environment, and I'll just point to that here quick. Located right there. And what that does is that, kids aren't getting outside as much as they used to, connected to technology. And so anything that we can do to provide an outdoor learning environment to get kids outside and connected with nature again, studies have shown it's extremely valuable. So we're providing that opportunity for that learning to take place there. And then the other one, at that design charrette, we gave people the opportunity we had paper building blocks, and they could lay the building out the way that they thought it would work best. And the recurring theme that we saw was that people wanted essentially 2 schools within the same building, having the elementary school on one side of the building, and then having the middle school on another side of the building, and then have those be connected by the shared spaces, and that's what you'll see here. The main entry is at the orange location there, where it's the administration and secure entry. And so how that works is that there's a variety of entries and exits around the building, up by the middle school pod and the K through 5 pod. So before and after the bell rings, when kids are entering the building at the beginning and end of the day, before the bell is rung, they can enter and exit those entrances freely, and there'll be a staff member that's there supervising those entries and exits. After the bell is rung, all those doors will be electronically locked down, and the only way that you can get into the building is through that main entry that's right by the administration area. We intentionally placed a lot of offices on the exterior wall, not only for their benefit of natural light and views, but to get as many eyes on that main entry as possible, again, from that safety and security standpoint. And then the way it works is when people enter that vestibule, the only way that they can get into the building is if they go into the reception area, check in, and then they'll be let back out. So that's the secure entry sequence. To the left, or to the right of that main entry is the elementary school gym. And then at the south end, that's where that 2-story early childhood and K through 5 wing is located. The pre-K through early childhood has been specifically designed so it can be its own self-contained space within the building, but then it does have the opportunity, if the faculty want to, get out into the rest of the building to use the other amenities of the building, they have that ability, but they also have the ability to lock that space down so that students can't get into that space. And then to the above that is the STEM and Media Lab, and then farther down the line there's also the STEM and CTE boxes, which are the dark green boxes. Those were intentionally placed along the main corridor because we really want to show off the STEM and CTE and media spaces. So being able to highlight those activities that are taking place in those spaces for when parents come or there's other visitors, that we're really showcasing the learning that's taking place in those spaces. The blue box that's to the left of the administration area, that is shared special ed spaces. Each of the middle school and the K through 5 wings will also have their own dedicated special ed classroom, but there's a number of shared spaces that would be located there that would be used by both elementary students and middle school students. And then just above that is the 300-seat auditorium, and next to that is the art and music area as well. So so that when they build sets or if there's a performance and they're going to be using their instruments, that they have that close proximity to the auditorium. And then to the left of that is the cafeteria and kitchen. So that space is obviously where kids will have lunch, but then that space is sandwiched in between the theater and the middle school, so they can act as a pre and post function space for whenever there's activities in those spaces. The yellow middle school gym, that would also be the competition gym. So again, close proximity to the cafeteria as well as that event entry, so that people can, come in through that north entrance and access those spaces for events. And then finally on the, upper left hand of the building diagram is the 6th through 8th grade learning community. So yeah. And then the special considerations are whether or not the building will be, we know that the building has to be LEED Silver, that's a requirement. The other two tiers for the dollar amount ask is whether the building will be net zero ready or completely net zero. And what that means, the net zero ready means that we would install geothermal and make sure that the structure is sized properly so that at a future date you could add the photovoltaic panels if you wanted to. Net zero would be doing that, but then also installing those photovoltaic panels so that the building is completely net zero. And then the other special consideration would be the need to rectify the FCAR deficiencies for 30 years. So.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us up to today, 9:25, and tomorrow, 9:26, is our proposal is due. We're going to be breaking this down into two different proposals like we talked about, a design proposal and then a build proposal. So tomorrow I'll be set to submit our first design proposal to our Margit, who is our contact, and that will be about 200 pages, which is where we're just finishing that up here tonight. So we're excited to get that one off and running. What this does is by having a build proposal and the design proposal separate is it gives us time to really work to get that 20% match for the build side of things. So then as soon as we are done with this, we're going to move right into that phase 2 and that build proposal, which is going to come up very quickly. So in that design budget, we are going to be asking for $3.66 million. So the grant would cover $2.9 million, and the district match for us then, for District 140, would be that $733,000. And that's just going to be covering the design work that we have coming up in order to get ready to submit for that build proposal. So again, here's our design timeline. So tomorrow we'll be submitting the build proposal. Then after that, once they get through their parts and their questions of us, they're going to be setting out a federal review team to review our site and review everything. They are telling us that's going to be late winter or spring of 2024. We're going to assume that's going to be after March because they don't want to come in the snow. There's also going to be that environmental study that needs to be conducted that we're working on. And then hopefully by spring, May-ish, we're going to be moving right into that building proposal. In the meantime, work is going to be continuing on the building proposal. And then we also do need to get an invite once we submit this build proposal from our PSMI team. Once they've approved our design proposal, that'll be the next step. So I will turn back to Dr. Brenner.
So that's what we have for you this evening.
Are those highlighted anywhere, like as an asterisk 1 and 2, or?
Sure,
I
yeah.
just might be missing it.
And I'll take recommendation here to get them highlighted, but I think you're asking where in the following pages does it indicate the comment?
Yeah.
So with 1, for example, in the box under comment, electronic page 42, you'll follow it down the left margin on electronic page 44 as you encounter the number 1. and they're simply ordered in first account occurrence. So electronic page 44, top left-hand corner under salaries.
Got it.
A.
Thank you. And then my last question is related to insurance. We're already at 100%. Is that one bulk payment?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yep. Want to make sure we pay that bill right away.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Monty.
Brandon, so if we go back to page 44, is that, so the percent change is 444.3? Is that right?
Yes, and what that is not a percentage of budget or anything like that. It's just, for the first 2 months last year, we'd only spent $5,000, and this year we'd already spent $29,000. Again, there's a lot going on there, but when you have such small numbers, the percentages are going to be a little astronomical.
Any, go ahead.
When do we have to have our ESSER funds, is that done this year? Is that right?
That's right. The federal cutoff date is September 30, 2024. But it's our aim to have those closed out with our fiscal year, so that'd be June 30, 2024. And just like ESSER 2, we had that aim, but we had one that it's showing up in this year's budget. But it's our priority to get those spent by the federal deadline. It just helps us if we can align it with the fiscal year.
Any additional questions? If not, I'll seek a motion to approve the general fund financial statement for the period of July 1 through August 31 as presented. Motion by Bill, is there a second? Second. Second by Josh. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now move on to the designation of the North Dakota School Board Association Convention delegates. Dr. Brenner?
Thank you, President Flynn. Page 48, I'll just read through the memo for all of you and add a couple of comments right at the end. North Dakota School Board Association convention delegates and alternates must have their names submitted to NDSBA office by October 13th to vote in the delegate assembly, which meets at the end of the convention schedule. Delegates' names must be submitted at the time of registration. Only elected school board members may serve as delegates and alternates. According to the formula for determining delegates, District 140 is authorized up to 5 delegates out of our 9-member board. To date, Board Member Monty Gockler has indicated she plans to attend the annual convention. It's not yet known if any other board members plan to attend the annual convention. If others do plan on attending, please let Cindy know by the end of this week. So the administrative recommendation is for the board to designate Monty Gockler as the delegate and authorize the district administration to designate up to 4 additional board members who register to attend the convention to serve as convention delegates to the 2023 NDSBA Annual Convention and Delegate Assembly.
Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Motion by Cynthia, is there a second? Second by Monty. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now move on to the annual compliance report. Dr. Brenner?
That one is me as well, thank you. Page 49, the annual compliance report is in front of you. North Dakota Century Code 15.1-0606 requires that all North Dakota schools and school districts must submit an annual compliance report to the North Dakota Department of Public Instruction by October 1st of each year in order to be declared approved and to receive foundation aid. The report is completed and submitted on the state STARS system. In order to obtain certification for approval, the school district superintendent must submit a report to each of the district's schools, complete with a signature of the school principal and the superintendent. The annual compliance report must be approved by the school board prior to the submission by the superintendent. Attached is a copy of the summary report as evidence of compliance by each of the district's schools. All school principals indicate complete compliance with all compliance areas. Administrative recommendation is for approval of the 2023-24 annual compliance report. Thank you.
I'll seek a motion for approval of the annual compliance report. Motion by Cynthia, is there a second? Second. Second by Monty. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now move on to the Superintendent Evaluation Committee report. Josh?
All right, so thanks for the opportunity to walk through this. The committee met last week on September 18th to review and discuss, discuss, and agree on the content and criteria for this year's superintendent evaluation. This is to be completed by all board members of Districts 1 and 140. Members of that committee are myself, Monty Gockler, Jeff Manley, Cynthia Schaub, and Michelle Shepard from the District 140 board. As was discussed and shared following last year's evaluation completions, there was a desire to review and look at a new evaluation instrument and format. Dr. Brenner shared with us some different tools and criteria pieces that he found when researching other North Dakota school district tools, and shared with us a tool that you see in front of you, that includes the superintendent job description and district strategic plan as criteria to be included for the evaluation. This format, it has a similar number of questions to the prior instrument that we used, but we felt, I think, in our discussions as a group, that it was more in line with and would serve the purpose as a whole better. As you can see, it is in compliance with the board regulation, CAA, BR, to follow that. As a part of it, Dr. Brenner will provide a narrative of indicators for each evaluation area. The evaluation instrument would be similar to last year delivery via a Google form or SurveyMonkey. Along with that, Dr. Brenner will provide his goals with the evaluation tool. Board members are certainly encouraged to reach out to Dr. Brenner with any questions on certain pieces of the evaluation as a whole that you may have or not quite understand. And then, as you can see in the tool, as you scroll through, as a whole, it is on a performance scale of 1 to 4, highly effective, effective, partially effective, and ineffective, along with giving us the ability to provide comments for each section. I think, as we've discussed, as we've heard Dr. Brenner share in past, and we discussed this year also, that comment section is certainly a very valuable tool for us to be able to provide feedback outside of just the number ranking scale. Overall, there was really quite a bit of discussion on the tool and the use of both the job description content and the strategic plan input and questions for these both. But again, I think I mentioned prior, but these were, it was felt by the committee as a whole after quite a bit of robust discussion that it was valid and good to use this as a whole. Along with that, Dr. Brenner did share that, again, the feedback, the commentary feedback on all of this is beneficial for himself, I believe. So with that, in turn, the committee and administrative recommendation is to approve this process and instrument for this year's superintendent evaluation. As you can see again on the memo, the timeline, how this would work out. These both have to be completed, or this will be completed twice, one by November 15th and then again by March 15th. With that, I would open to further comments from other committee members or any questions from anyone else.
Just wanted to clarify one thing. I think the strategic plan, or I'll ask it in a question format, remind us where the target goals are for the learning objectives that we set as a board and as a district in terms of math learning goals and reading learning goals. The strategic plan, or remind us where those goals are.
Yeah, they'll be imported into the strategic plan, so you'll see those when that document goes out attached. And also, to the person who came to the microphone earlier, there will be 2 other metrics for you to evaluate me on. Because of the Be Legendary training, the board had agreed to allow district administration to come back with what do we want to see our literacy growth, our math growth, those percents. That's goal 1 for me, and goal number 2 for me is to reduce our expenditures by over $2 million over the next 2 years. So you'll be able to see results of those. They won't be timely because the state assessment is given in March, and those results don't come back sometimes till July or a little bit later. But nonetheless, you'll be able to see whether we hit those goals or not. So those broad academic goals that you approved, those are my goals, and those feed down to the buildings as well.
Other comments or questions? We've talked about over the years adding an NA section. Did you guys talk about that in your evaluation committee?
No, I don't think we did talk about adding an NA specifically, no.
Maybe, so the previous instrument, there was some questions that I think board members had said that they didn't feel necessarily like they had enough information to answer because maybe they weren't like in the classroom enough or understood certain things. And so having an option to have NA, and maybe that's like where we can do the comments, but I'm not sure how certain things are calculated, I guess.
I think we didn't specifically talk about an NA. However, I think in looking through the document and the questions there, at least a couple of us mentioned that we felt that we would be better prepared to answer some of them because they aligned a little better.
Yep.
So we didn't probably in turn then talk about an NA.
Sure.
Dr. Brown?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you come across something that you're not aware of, you can either reach out to me or you can leave it blank. All you're going to be doing is checking either highly effective, effective, partially effective, or ineffective, or you can leave it blank. The only place you're going to rank me would be at the bottom of each page,
Okay.
where you'll circle either 4, 3, 2, or 1.
Okay, I was wondering how the instrument calculated too, so, and I think this will be nice, we need a time or two to kind of get familiar with the new instrument and kind of walk through before we have any of those questions, so. Thank you for the work in looking over the new policy tool. And to the comment earlier, the district is very aware of SMART goals, and that was a process that was done during the Be Legendary training, and those SMART goals will then have some place in the strategic plan and throughout this evaluation tool. Okay, I'll have a motion to approve just want to make sure I got it right. The process and instrument for this year's superintendent evaluations. Motion by Jeff, is there a second? Second by Monty, assuming a roll call vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now move on to the policy review. Cynthia?
Thank you. So last time we already went through these, so it's really just a second reading as written for the following policies. I'll go ahead and put this in one motion. I make a motion to approve ABAD as amended, ABEC as amended, BC meetings of the board as amended, board meeting agenda and pre-meeting preparation as amended, the professional development plan, FAAA, open enrollment, possessing weapons, suspension and expulsion, visitors in the schools, education opportunities through sponsoring entities, disbursement of monies, education of the homeless student, and students in foster care. I made a motion to approve all of those as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Then the next part is to rescind those, presuming, because we adopted BC and BCAB eventually, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the 8400, which was the former business manager's procedure, which is now HCAE, disbursement of monies.
Okay.
I make a motion to rescind those two policies.
Is there a second? Second by Josh, okay. All those in favor, or assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item H, consolidated grant application for federal title funding. Matt, here we go.
All right. Thank you, President Flynn, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Before I get started, I want to make a note. This is the first time I've turned my microphone on, just so you're aware. So, looking forward to being part of the team. So, today I want to present on the consolidated grant application for federal title funding for 2023-24 school year. I've put a brief overview for you together for you today to review our title grant as it relates to federal funds. And so please feel free to jump in with any questions you have as we go through each slide. First thing I put together is a comparison between this year and last year. I think it's always good to see where we're at as far as from Title I all the way down to Title IV and just our total allocation as it compares to previous years. As you'll see a decrease in our Title IV funds as well in our Title III funds. That's pretty typical based on what Congress acted on as far as title funds across the board. Also as it relates to the state level and our allocation across the state. Grand Forks Public Schools, when it compares to the state, is sitting relatively the same spot as we were previous years. Again, the allocation to the state was lower than previous years as well. So, Part A, going into each item, just so you're aware of what each title part does and as far as how we expend those dollars. The first one, Title I, is really referencing fair and equitable education for all students and closing that achievement gap. Those are the primary goals of Title I. Just one thing to note here is a reminder that our supplant rules apply. And really, Title I is supposed to be really that cherry on top. It's supposed to be in addition to what we already do, what the district already provides as far as funding goes. So I like to use the analogy of it's the scoop of ice cream that the district provides, and everything else that goes on top is the cherry on top for our district that Title I is supposed to provide. And so just so you're aware of that. Now, big numbers that indicate what our funding is our free and reduced numbers, free and reduced lunch numbers. And so you'll see those numbers up on the screen for you to look at. Overall, looking at a district of 33.91% from the 2022-23 school year. Now, one thing I also want to note here is that this is the federal funds and the federal free and reduced lunch allocation. This year with the legislature, the legislative bill that passed where it actually increased individuals who actually qualify for reduced lunch will actually fall under a free guidance by the state. When we go to calculate these numbers, we are taking just the federal guidelines. We are not taking the state guidelines. And so that's important to note that even though a family may qualify for state free meals, they will not qualify when it comes to title dollars as free students or free allocation or free lunch. They would be under that reduced category. So it's important to note that difference. And so we have different categories that students and families may qualify under federal, state, and then not at all. So just making sure you understand that difference. Here are our allocations for the 2023-24 school year. This is broken down by building. And so you'll see what the building allocations are, as well as what their family engagement dollars are as well, and then their total budget. You'll also see on the side there district reservations, and these are basically district dollars that we utilize for various things throughout the district. And I provided activities that we use these dollars for, grant management coordinator, para-certification process, which it's important to note that all of our individuals that work in school-wide schools, Title I school-wide schools, need to be highly qualified. And so if we hire a para through the process that is not what they would deem at the state level to be highly qualified, they need to go through a process to become highly qualified. In order to compensate those individuals for that process, as well as the process that we hire a proctor to go through the education as well as the testing process, that's where that compensation goes, is to compensate those individuals for the work they put in.
Additionally, we have supplies in there, and we also have professional development travel. Then we also do provide our neglected and delinquent funds to RMAC facility support, and most of that is for supply purposes, for educational interventions at the reading and math level with RMAC. Next item I'll show you as far as Title I is our funded activities. So we really have a wide range of what we fund in Title I. And it falls all across the district. You'll see anything from interventions to dean of students to training, professional development, supplies, equipment. Really, we cover a large amount across our district with these title funds. Again, a reminder that it needs to meet that supplement, supplant rules and laws. It needs to be in addition to. And so as a district, when we look at funding, a first grade teacher for every single classroom or every single building, if we're looking to hire a second one, potentially that could come into play here, but it needs to be in addition to what the district has already committed to. And so really when we're looking at funding activities, we're again really looking for that cherry on top. Family engagement, this is a directive that we have to, any district that receives over $500,000 in allocation in Title I needs to set aside 1% of those for family and parent engagement. And so if I go back to the previous slide, when we look at those dollar amounts in the family engagement column, those are the 1% that we're setting aside to make up a total allocation at the very end of that $31,000. And again, that's the 1%. So if you look through and you look at like Ben Franklin and you're like, oh, is that exactly 1%? It's pretty close, but that's just determined by the rank and serve process on what their allocation for the family engagement should be, making up the final allocation of our district at 1%. I know some of you maybe are trying to calculate that and going, oh, well, that's not exactly 1%. It's because, again, our district total needs to be at that 1%, and so those numbers are processed through the rank and serve process that we use. And so again, for funded activities that we use for these, primarily it's family events and school-wide activities throughout the year, and that varies throughout each individual school and what they determine to do throughout the school year. Funding set aside for homeless. This is primarily used to provide supports for any student or family who are experiencing homelessness. Our funds and how we calculate our funds is we have to look at our overall grant, and it needs to sit between 1% and 5% of that allocation. Based on our allocation this year, we're sitting at about 4.5% of our total allocation sits in our homeless, and that's directly pulled out of the grant right away. And it funds some of the activities that you'll see before you. The homeless liaison, specifically working with families and with students who experience that homelessness and providing supports that they may not be getting at home and throughout our community. Additionally, we also provide transportation. And when I say transportation supports, I'm talking bus services, bus tickets, as well as gas vouchers for families that may need that support throughout the time. And there's certain criteria that they need to have in order to qualify for that. Additionally, we also provide the basic needs and supplies, which again include hygiene, school supplies, things again that they may not have readily available that the district can access utilizing these funds. Title II, Part A, I like to basically put it very simplistic terms, professional development. How do we continue to provide professional development for our staff, make sure that we have the highest achieving staff and making sure that they're prepared and ready to meet the needs of our students and our community. And so Title II is primarily about how do we provide high quality education within every single classroom. And so Title II really encompasses that. And so when we look at our funded activities, we're looking at instructional coaches, our chief academic officer, curriculum coordinators, both at the secondary and elementary level, as well as our staff professional development, which includes AVID training, counselor training, and different conferences that they go to. Again, these FTEs are spread out across the entire district. It doesn't just serve one specific school, it serves the entire district. Unlike Title I, where Title I can only be given or used for funds for that specific school that qualify for Title I. Title II, Title III, and Title IV serve our entire district, whether you qualify for as a Title I school or not. And so it's important to note the differences between those. Title I is strictly for those schools that qualify for Title I services. Title III primarily is our ML, or also known as EL, services that are provided for students and for the district. One thing I will note is that EL, English learners, is transitioning to multilingual learners, and so you may hear us say ML versus EL. But again, previously it would have been referred to as EL or ELL just a couple years ago as well. And so just so you know, that's the new terminology and transition we're making over to the ML. Funded activities here, we have a small pot, as you'll see, with the 23,000. That really looks at professional development for our ML coordinator, as well as our ML summer school tutors that we provide at the high school level, and then instructional supplies and any costs for registration of professional development or staff training that they may need. So that small pot does go a long ways in the amount that we have there. Title IV, this is broken down into 3 categories, and I've broken down the goals of that, but it really breaks down to 3 different pots. And so I'm going to move forward to the next slide, and these are the funding criteria, just so you're aware of the 3 different pots that we're looking at. We're looking at well-rounded education, we're looking at safe and healthy education, and then supporting the effective use of technology within our schools. And so you'll see that each one of them has a criteria that they need to meet and a percentage that they have to meet. So for instance, well-rounded, it has to be 20% of our allocation. It can be above 20%, but it has to be at least 20%. Same with supporting safe and healthy students. It has to be that 20%. It can be above it, but it has to at least be 20%. Whereas supporting technology use, it has a cap of 15% on educational equipment and software and digital membership or content. And so they're kind of a little different. The first 2, it has to be 20% or above, and the last one is a cap of 15%. And you'll see that's why we have a small chunk in that technology, and that really looks at the providing after-school robotics clubs and some of that equipment and technology needed for that. Primarily, excuse me, primary use of this is for within each one of these buckets, I would call them. Well-rounded education primarily looks at the robotics as well as AVID, the AVID coordinator, and how do we continue to provide that well-rounded education for our students. Supporting safe and healthy students, primarily looking at the MTSS coordinators, again, across our district, both at the elementary and secondary level. And then technology, primarily the after-school robotics program and that technology that it provides. So at this time, I will stand for any questions that you may have as it relates to our title funds. If there are no questions, I would otherwise ask that the board approve the 2023-24 consolidated grant application for Grand Forks Public Schools in the amount of $4,787,709.58.
Any questions? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I have a couple, but first I just wanted to say I really like ML, multilingual learners, because many of the language learners know more than one language. I wondered about the Title III funding. Is there any funding from Title III to the Mentor Center? Because you've got the ML summer school tutor for high school students, and I don't know where that's housed, if it's at the schools or at the Mentor Center, and where the Mentor Center funding is coming into play here?
I don't believe any, to my knowledge, none of the Title III funds go into the Mentor Center at this point in time.
Are those ESSER dollars? And then, if I might, who's the AVID coordinator now?
Currently, right now, Amy Barch is serving in that role at this point in time. We're going through the process of transitioning over to an AVID coordinator. We currently have the position posted. She is serving those duties and roles at this point in time.
Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions? For purposes of this slide right here, I think it's highly underfunded. And I just want to point out the great work that our district does for the ML. And to your point about really stretching the budget, I'm sure it's stretched very thin. So I hope in the future we can communicate how much of a need we have at our district to hopefully highlight, and that's not on you, that's just higher level to everyone to say this is something that greatly benefits our community as well. And then to the last slide, I happen to have a 5th grader who's interested and has joined after school robotics this year, and I have heard that it's like record-breaking numbers. And so again, to have opportunities like this in our district that align strategically with academics but also provide another extracurricular opportunity for kids is pretty awesome. So thank you. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead.
I just appreciate very much, Matt, the way you highlighted everything and explained it. It was very clear and concise and easy to follow, so thank you very much.
So the administrative recommendation is to approve the 2023-2024 consolidated grant application for the Grand Forks School District in the amount of $4,787,709.58.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion by Cynthia, is there a second? Second by Dave. Assuming a roll call vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll now move on to the announcements portion of our meeting. Dr. Benner?
I have one. Thank you, Madam President. I think it's worth noting for our community that each and every board member is service-oriented. And not only do you spend hours at the board table, but you spend hours preparing for conversations at the board table. Most of you spent hours leading up to the referendum in community meetings, public forums, et cetera. And sometimes the community doesn't see that. And not only that, but last June, the first week of June, all of you gave up 2 days of your own personal time. I know some of you used vacation to go through a school board training, to spend 2 days in this room with some trainers who came in to talk about metrics and academic achievement and how we're going to measure that and how we're going to really talk about board education and student learning at the board table. So as a result of that, you received a wonderful, really heavy glass B Legendary School Board Leadership plaque that states Grand Forks Public School Board for their leadership and commitment to ensure each student, each year, continuously improves in what they know and are able to do so they are prepared to be successful in whatever they choose to do after their K-12 journey, August 2023. I want to congratulate you and thank you for the time that you put in as school board members representing our community. Thank you.
Thank you. This is maybe not necessarily an announcement, but a recognition. We have a guest in the audience, Dr. Sanford. I was nervous at first that you were here to talk about taxes, but you didn't come up to the mic. So sorry, Senator Kern. Sorry. I was nervous that you were going to talk about taxes for a minute, but thanks for coming to join us. It's important to have legislators in our audience learn more about what we do, and I appreciate your collaborativeness and the ability to work together with us. So sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Kern. Other announcements? Go ahead. Okay. Board request for future consideration. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I was so excited I hit my mic too quickly. I'm just wondering about a Valley Bus update. I know I've gotten a couple emails, and so I'm just wondering how that's, I know it's a new system. Are the kinks ironing out? Or what's the status of that? I'd be curious to know.
Okay, thank you.
We can bring that back.
Okay. Other board requests for future consideration? Okay. School board meeting norms. Jeff?
Very respectful and great conversation.
Okay. I will out myself and just say I apologize for being late again. I knew I was on a tight timeline and I didn't let Dave and Dr. Brenner know sooner than I probably could have, so that was on me. So thank you for bearing with me. Okay. We are now adjourned. Thank you.